Good morning and welcome to another edition of Weston on the Hill. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alice Peisch. I've been the state representative for the 14th Norfolk District, which includes the towns of Wellesley, Weston, and part of Lincoln, since 2003. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to serve the town of Weston. For 12 years while I was in the legislature, I served as the House Education Chair, and that is the area that I continue to spend most of my time in from a policy standpoint. But for the past 3+ years, I've been the Assistant Majority Leader, which has given me an opportunity to be involved in a wider range of issues. I am here this morning with Town Manager Leon Goldman to discuss the activities that have been occurring at the State House that have an impact on the town of Weston. And obviously those will include budget, bills, etc. And I will give you an update, and Leon will comment on their impact on the town.
Thank you for the welcome, and thank you for allowing me to come.
So since I was last here, I thought I'd just touch on a few of the things that we have done. We have passed some legislation that I think is should be of interest to the Weston citizens. Most of it is still in conference, meaning we're working out the differences between the House and the Senate. One that I'm especially interested in, that I am currently chairing the conference committee on, is a bill that would ban cell phones from what is referred to as bell to bell in public schools in Massachusetts. That means no access to cell phones from the time a student arrives at school until the time that they leave. And then, in addition to that, the House version of the bill also prohibits access to social media by students under 14. And then there's some variation as to between 14 and 16, you need parental consent, and after 16, treated as an adult. The Senate passed just a ban on the cell phones, not the social media aspect of it. So we are working out those differences. I believe I spoke about this the last time I was here, so I won't go into great detail, but I know that the town of Weston on its own has a policy that bans cell phones bell to bell. So I think they are a good model for the rest of the state. Other legislation that we have enacted in the House that remains in conference that I think is of interest to most residents of the Commonwealth is something called the PROTECT Act, which deals with how the state interacts with the federal immigration authorities. And we put some restrictions on fairly what I would call reasonable restrictions on what the federal officers can do on state property. So for example, for a civil matter, they would need a warrant to arrest someone in a courthouse. This is an area that has generated a lot of interest, given, I think, what many people view as a little overzealousness, to say the least, on the part of the immigration authorities. This is not intended to prohibit enforcement of our federal immigration laws. I don't think anyone is in favor of that. I will say that the legislation was really informed by the views of members of our legislature who represent communities where this is a big issue. And, contrary to what some people were pushing, they were less interested in making a statement and, for example, prohibiting masks, which we do not have the jurisdiction to prohibit, than in doing some things that would have a practical, positive impact on their communities. The Senate passed a version that's slightly different, and that is in conference. In fact, the conference committee met for the first time last week, so I anticipate that will be moving along. A third area that we passed some legislation in that I know is of very general interest is an energy affordability bill. I think most of us were confronted with very high electric bills this winter. Some of that we can do some things to respond to, but much of it is out of our control. But one of the things that we are attempting to do is to reduce the amount of fees that are reflected on the bill relative to some of our state programs. We haven't eliminated them. The programs, the Mass Save program, for example, very popular, but nonetheless, it has really exploded in cost over the past several years. And given how high the electric bills are, we're attempting to put some controls on that. The Senate, I believe, is taking a different approach. So with any luck, we will reach agreement on that before the end of the session in July. Those are the main areas of a legislative action that I thought are of general interest. Obviously, there is much more. I would like to touch on the budget because I think that's has an impact on just about every community. That too is in conference. Weston received, what they were anticipating relative to state aid for both Chapter 70 for the schools as well as the general unrestricted local aid. I was able to get a few Weston-specific earmarks in the budget that I'm hopeful will survive conference. A $50,000 for the Landsake Farm, $75,000 for new fire trucks, and $100,000 for design funds for a new fire station, something that I know the town is very interested in pursuing. Excuse me. And the last thing that I want to just touch on before we engage in conversation here at Leon is the home rule petitions that Weston has filed with the legislature, two of which have already been enacted. One of which I think is really significant for the town, and that is expanding the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5. And it's my understanding that that was enacted in the fall, and then based on that, you've had your elections, and you now actually have a 5-member board.
That's correct. We now have 5 members. We brought in 3 brand new people. Select Board member Tom Palmer had decided not to run for re-election and get on with the next chapter of his life. And we elected 3 new people to serve on the board. Al Adeli, who you probably know, has been on the planning board and historic commission for a number of years. Rebecca Mercuri, and Anupam Sadchev, who were all elected at the town election. They were unopposed, and we've now had our second meeting of the select board with the 3 new members. So it's been a learning curve for them. It's been a little bit for the staff to get used to, having new mouths to feed with information and such. But so far so good.
Yes, and I think having a larger board will allow for a greater participation by the residents, as well as, I think, a better distribution of the work. I know that the work of a volunteer select board can often be quite overwhelming, and to be able to spread that among 5 as opposed to 3 people, I think will be a good thing for the town.
So at the meeting on Tuesday night, they did a lot of divvying up the work and deciding who is going to be responsible for what. They all have their hands full, and they're up to the task.
Well, that's great. And then another, not quite as significant, but important to the town, was an act increasing the age limit for retired police officers to serve as special police officers, which I imagine is something that from time to time the town needs to have additional police officers directing traffic and things of that nature.
Yeah. I mean, one of the challenges that we have is, today's police officers, firefighters, DPW employees, they're less interested in overtime opportunities. Not to say that they're not interested, but they're less interested and they're more choosy. But we have a lot of work that goes on within the town of Weston. Our own road reconstruction projects, the state's reconstruction projects, utility companies doing work, tree work, road work. We have an abundance of opportunities for work, extra jobs that go unfilled. And we do have people who are trained, retired police officers who are in great physical condition who could certainly lend a hand when we have a need. And that, your help in getting that special act through the legislature for us was greatly appreciated.
Well, I'm happy to help. And then there are two that are pending, just recently filed
Yep.
this month. So I would imagine that they will, be going through the process relatively quickly. One which would grant an additional license for the sale of all alcoholic beverages, and another one transferring some land from the Conservation Commission, I believe, to the Select Board's control. Is that correct?
This is for our water tank project. This was voted by town meeting previously last year, and the vote was to exchange some non-conservation land for some conservation land as part of the Article 97 land swap process. So we will be making the amount of conservation land whole. In fact, the land that is being transferred is of great interest to our Conservation Commission, is of good use to them, and it also helps from the water department standpoint. It gives us good access to lands where we need to put up the new water tanks. So,
Yeah, which is a huge project.
yeah, it's a huge project.
And then the last thing that's very Weston specific that I wanted to mention that is not actually related to legislation specifically, although it could be. There has been great interest in having the old Weston Depot site renovated and being leased by an organization that is interested in doing that. And after what I consider to be far too long, the MBTA is finally proceeding with leasing the land to the Friends of Weston Depot. They've shared a draft lease agreement with the Friends. This may sound like a relatively minor event, but it took a tremendous amount of effort. People may not be surprised to learn that while this is very important to the town of Weston, the MBTA has many, many, many issues that they're dealing with, and getting their attention on this was a bit of a challenge. But I'm very hopeful that lease will be acceptable and will be executed shortly, and progress can be made on that important project.
No, we appreciate your help on that as well. I know that the Select Board has felt that having a nonprofit group be the ones who manage the operations and the restoration of that property, and your work with them has been, very much appreciated.
Yes, so I'm looking forward to the final outcome.
Whatever that will be.
Yes.
Whatever that will be.
And then there was one other piece of legislation that is moving, not yet through either chamber, but that's the Municipal Empowerment Act, which I know, Leon, you've been very interested in certain aspects of it. It was reported favorably to Ways and Means, where it now sits, and the provisions that I know you were interested in that were part of that approved report were provisions on double polls, an issue
Very
everywhere.
big issue, yep.
And then a permanently instituting remote public meeting language. So very hopeful that will move forward. Unfortunately, and I would say that this is an issue that there is not a broad consensus on whether it should happen or not. I know from the perspective, from your perspective, you would have appreciated maybe some local tax options, but those were not included in the bill. So, and I suspect that they will not be included in the final version. So I think that concludes the points that I wanted to make. Leon, do you have any questions about anything else that's maybe
No,
pending?
but I did want to acknowledge the legislature's role in the Chapter 90 funds for the upcoming
yes.
year as well. Chapter 90 funds are one of the areas that local governments really rely on to improve our roads, our sidewalks, our bridges, essentially our public infrastructure. And we haven't seen, an increase in those numbers in many, many, many years, even though inflation has really eaten away at our ability to properly maintain our roads. This might be less of a problem for Weston than it is for a lot of other communities. We do invest quite a bit of our own monies as part of our annual operating budget ourselves for road and bridge and sidewalk improvements. However, it's not nearly enough for us to adequately maintain everything to the standards that folks in Weston would come to appreciate. And knowing in advance what our allocation for Chapter 90 funds for next year looks like is really a great step forward. It helps us properly manage and fund our construction projects. So the state deserves a lot of credit for taking action on something that needed to be taken. So.
Well, I'm certainly happy that we were able to do that. That leads me to another sort of general topic that I wanted to just touch upon briefly. And that is the sort of condition of the state budget and state funding on a variety of issues going forward. While the budgets that have passed the House and Senate and are now in conference, I think are quite reasonable given the circumstances, I'm very concerned about the FY28 budget, which would be the budget that starts July 1 of 2027, a year from now. As I'm sure you know, and I'm sure many of our viewers know, the federal government is cutting way back on their investments in both directly in state government as well as in private organizations, research funds, and so on. And these are all having a very negative impact on Massachusetts. The federal budget cut that is going to go into effect in January of 27 to Medicaid is quite significant. And if that, in fact, goes through as planned, it will have a domino effect on our FY28 budget. And I'm just raising this as an issue of concern. And I think people have to start thinking about that some of these things that communities rely on may be less available as a result of that. I am hopeful that maybe that cut doesn't actually happen to the degree that is planned, but we shall see. Mm-hmm. And not unrelated to that, I just would like to make a pitch on a number of ballot questions. There is an unusually high number of ballot questions this fall on the ballot. I was the House Chair of the Special Committee to review the ballot questions and make recommendations to the legislature on whether we should enact those questions or let them go to the ballot. I will say that one of the challenges with ballot questions is that they are always drafted by generally an organization or an individual with a very narrow perspective. And so even if you're sympathetic to the goal, the language tends to be not very good. And as a result, all of our recommendations were not to enact because we don't have the option. If we were to say, it's a good idea, but we would like to see some changes and we'll amend it and pass it, the question could still go to the ballot. So as a result of that, we've made recommended not enacting any of them. There's one in particular that I would like to bring to people's attention because I think it may sound somewhat innocuous, but would be very detrimental to the entire Commonwealth were it to pass. And that is a question that would reduce the state income tax by 20%. It would be a reduction from 5% to 4%. 20% of the state revenue from income tax is a huge number. And compounding the federal cuts, I think we would find ourselves in an extraordinarily difficult situation next year if that question were to pass. And yet I understand that from the perspective of an individual, reducing their state income tax can be very appealing. So I'm a little worried about what happens with that question at the ballot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from a municipality's perspective, these are things that have been chilling to some of municipal leaders across the state. As you know, there has been a inordinate number of Prop 2.5 overrides in the last few years, and including recently, not in Weston, thankfully, but in other communities. And if those communities are going to have to face an additional shortfall in local aid, for example, or school aid, for example, how do they maintain level services without increasing their own budgets? It's going to be extraordinarily challenging. It's going to force communities to start thinking about wants versus needs, and what are things that are mandated to be done versus what are things that would be nice to be done. And it's going to be very difficult for cities and towns across Massachusetts in the next next year for sure, if all of a sudden local aid was to be reduced by, say, 20%.
Yes.
Which I know is not on the table right this minute.
No, it's not, and hopefully it will not be necessary, but I think it's very important for people to understand that there are consequences to this. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, it will fall on the municipalities.
Yep.
And to either to cut services dramatically or to increase the property taxes. And I think that most of us would agree that the income tax is, as it goes across the entire Commonwealth, and then we redistribute it, particularly with school funding, to those communities that really need the money, is a much better option. So hopefully the voters will read the Red Book that the state secretary sends out in advance of the election and educate themselves on these questions, and understand that while they may have some appeal, they all have some certain aspects that don't make a lot of sense in terms of their impact. That really concludes everything that I wanted to bring the Weston residents up to speed on as far as action of the legislature. Unless there's something else, Leon, that you think I have overlooked?
I am always happy that you invite me to participate in this and give a Weston perspective. I want to thank you for all that you do, and good luck in the elections this upcoming year. And hopefully we'll see you maybe this time next year for another episode of Weston on the Hill.
Well, hopefully sooner than a year from now. But yes, thank you very much. I appreciate those kind words, Leon, and of course it's always a pleasure working with you as well.
Thank you.
And thank you to the Weston Cable TV for broadcasting this.